Okay, now that I finished having my coughing attack, I'm going to wrap up this review. So right now we're going to look at factor the difference of two squares. So I'm going to have 100x squared minus 9. Because I need to multiply to get to this final term, I know my signs have to be positive and negative. That is the only way to get a negative product, is by multiplying a positive and a negative. Also, when I'm looking at this, I don't have a middle term. So that means whatever I'm putting in here is going to have to cancel out, so I don't have that middle term. So let's take the square root of 100x squared, square root of 9. So this would give me 10x, and the square root of 9 is 3. Okay? So how do I not have a middle term? Well, let's look at this. If I look here, I have negative 30x. If I look here, I have a positive 30x. What happens to a negative 30x and a positive 30x? They cancel each other out. So I would just have 10x times 10x, which gives me 100x squared. And then 3 times positive 3 times a negative 3, which would give me that negative 9. Now, what if they give me a problem that I can't easily find the square root? What I noticed on a lot of your homework is you would just tell me it's prime instead of getting that greatest common factor. So you have to figure out what is that greatest common factor that can divide into both, which would give me those perfect squares that I need. So if I'm looking here, the squares where I can find the square root. So they're both even. So I'm going to do 2. Let's do 2. Okay. Now, once I do that, I have to show that 2 in front of my new problem that I'm looking at. So I'm going to do 50 divided by 2, which will give me 25x squared. Now, I noticed that some people, when we would divide, they would mess with the exponent. They would change the exponent. I am not dividing by any exponent. If I had an x here, then we would change that. But because I'm just looking at the numbers here, it's only going to do the 50 divided by the 2. And you're going to leave x squared alone. So same thing with here. I have the negative 32x to the 4th power, which I'm putting in the subtraction sign. So I need to do 32 divided by 2, which is going to give me that 16 x to the 4th power. I am not doing anything to either exponent. I'm just dividing the numbers, leaving the variable with the exponents alone. Okay? I have to have this 2 here, or it's not going to be a true statement here, because this 2 is part of the original. So now I can take the square root of the 25x squared and the 16x to the 4th power. I'm going to put the 2 in front. I'm going to put my parentheses. So 25x squared is going to be 5x. Now again, to multiply to this, to get a negative, I have to have a positive and a negative. So now looking at 16x to the 4th power, the square root of 16 is 4. I keep the x, and I am going to break that up, because when I multiply the exponents of variables, when I multiply them, I add them together. Well, the opposite is to break them apart, right? So then my final answer will have the 2, and then times 5x plus 4x squared times 5x minus 4x squared. Okay, but you have to have this as part of the final answer for it to be a complete answer. Okay, one more thing I'm going to cover is solving. So after we factor, you're going to solve. So when we do that, that means it has to equal 0. So I'm going to do x squared minus 10x plus 24 equals 0. Okay, so we're going to factor that out. Let's look at, make sure I'm on here. Okay, let's do this. Equals 0. There's no coefficient in the beginning, so I'm going to put my x's in. Okay, so this is positive, but the numbers I add when I add them together are going to be negative. So that means I have to have two negatives. This sign right here is going to dictate what I have, especially if I have that positive there. Okay? Now, we need to get to negative 10x, and we have a product of 24. So let's look at our factors of 24. So we're going to have 1 and 24. We're going to have 2 and 12. We're going to have 3 and 8. And we are going to have 4 and 6. Okay, well, I know they both have to be negative, and they have to get me to 10. So this is not going to get me to 10. It's a little easier because I don't have coefficients in front of the x. That's not going to get me to 10. 8 and 3 gets me to 11. 4 and 6. Well, I'm going to put in 4. I'm going to put in 6. It doesn't matter because I don't have the coefficient. Let's see. Negative 4x, negative 6x added together gives me 10x. Okay, so this is where you still have to continue on showing me the work. You have to solve for this. So you do have to show me the steps of equations. So I have x minus 4 equals 0, so I'm going to add 4 to each because the whole goal is to get x by itself. X equals 4. Okay? Over here, I'm going to add 6 to each side because I have a negative 6. The opposite of minus is addition. X equals 6. So this is what I'm looking for in that final answer when you actually have to solve it. Okay, let's do one more if you have to solve it, but it does not start off by equaling 0. So let's look at, and we have a coefficient in front of x squared. So let's look at 5x squared minus 4x minus 2 equals 7. Okay, so first thing I have to do is make sure I have a 0 on this side. So I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. So I'm going to rewrite that with 7 subtracted from both sides. I'm going to do 5x squared minus 4x minus 9 equals 0. Okay, that is prime. So I know I'm going to have one that's going to be 5x, and I know I'm going to have one that's x. I need to make 9. And when I add the numbers together, I get a negative 4. So let's look at the ways to make 9. To make 9, I'm going to do 1 times 9, or I'm going to do 3 times 3. Well, if I do 1 times 9, let's look at that. So I need a negative 4, so that means I have to have a negative larger number. What if I did minus 9 plus 1? Well, let's check that, and that would still be equal to 0. I couldn't do 3 times 3 because 5 times 3 gives me 15 minus a 3. That doesn't get me to negative 4. That is how I picked 9 and 1. So let's check. So I have negative 9x plus 5x. That would get me to negative 4x. Now it's set to 0, so now I need to show my work. My steps of equations. So I have 5x minus 9 equals 0, and I have x plus 1 equals 0. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. I'm going to have 5x equals 9. Then I'm going to divide 5 by both sides, which x would equal 9/5. Now on the other side, less steps. It's only a 1 step, so I have x plus 1 equals 0. So I'm going to take 1 away from each side. X equals -1. So this is my final answer for this one. I hope this helps you review for your test.